since Connecticut's election affected all these other states, you have to look at the layers of algorithms on top of the New York State algorithm, the New Jersey way they did it, the Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Vermont way they did it. But when I say Connecticut ran Rhode Island's election, I mean it. I mean they had no input from Rhode Island at all, probably. It's a bunch of patches. So here we go. Look and listen and learn, because we're going to have to figure out how Connecticut's algorithm overrode. And this guy found these things in a very odd way.
Because they're in the wrong. You know, this is like Hunter Biden suddenly saying he's not a cocaine addict, or he never was a cocaine addict, or he didn't have a child out of wedlock. It's like, it's too late to make those kinds of statements. In any way you try to excuse it, like, well, it's not really my daughter. Aliens came and they had something to do with it. And then they told me and hypnotized me into thinking it was my daughter, but then I was unhypnotized by my cocaine addiction. So he could come up with that, but it'd be unbelievable. Anyway.
Okay. Well, we're getting a little short on time. I'd like to just briefly talk about New Jersey a little bit.
Okay.
Because I think it's interesting that it does verify that this is not simply a phenomenon that's occurring in New York.
Yeah. Okay. So in New Jersey, they use different algorithms. There's two algorithms, but there are a lot of things that they do in common with New York. Okay. Well, first off, they've got the algorithms in the first place. That's kind of unusual, because you don't normally need something this complicated in order to perform a simple task, like assign sequential ID numbers. Keep in mind, by the way, that the ID numbers are public records. Therefore, there's no need for privacy. This is something that drives me crazy every time I look at it. But nevertheless, their primary algorithm does something really interesting. It actually reconfigures the ID number. So picture this. I'm going to hold up my hands here on my screen. Okay, so these are two parts of the number, and then there's a third part. Okay. So for their equivalent of the state ID number, it's a letter, okay, and it's A through P, which by the way is 16, and that letter has a hexadecimal connection, and 16 is a base 16 numbering system, so that's kind of important on its own right. But then they've got a 10-digit number after that.
So they're not allowed to tamper with the election record. And then they added the deletions, and no one's allowed to delete any record except for the town clerk of that county in many cases. So keep in mind, having the algorithm delete the records after they perform a function, that is treason, folks.
And then they break that into two 5-digit sections and reverse their positions. Okay? So that's the key to the New Jersey Scytl algorithm, is what I call it. Okay? And then they have another algorithm called the arcade. And the reason I name them this way is because when you scroll both of them, the arcade pattern looks like a game of Space Invaders, and the Scytl pattern looks like dripping icicle. But in any event, so what they've done, they have partitioned their state space, just like New York did. Okay? They have set it up so that there are different algorithms operating in discrete sections of that state space, which is exactly their state space, which is exactly what New York did. They have multiple versions of the algorithms in each of those two state spaces. So I'm going to describe it as in-range and out-of-range, just like New York, and it's because they're kind of similar. Okay. So in New Jersey, they have two ID numbers, what they call a legacy ID and a display ID. This you can think of as the new state and the old state ID. Okay. And the ones with the old state ID have this swapped number position business going on. Actually, all of them do. It's just when you do it in that one section where the Scytl pattern is found, they make the Scytl pattern. Okay, and when they do it in the other section, it makes the arcade pattern instead. And then what they do is they decimalize the numbers just like they did in New York. They used a Caesar cipher because that's what shifting the numbers is, right? So, you know, I showed it as a number swap, but in fact, really what's going on is the first five, let's do it this way, the first five numbers are pushing the others off, so that forces them to come back around into the other position. So that is a Caesar cipher. So they're using that, and then they interlace the numbers also.
So for the Connecticut registrars and the town clerks, like in the case of Bridgeport yesterday, refusing the federal subpoena really draws them into the racketeering end of it. Because for a state senator who just did that, he was elected through the system. He has no right to cover up the reveal. None whatsoever. Fatal mistake for this guy.
And they do that using the alpha characters with the hexadecimal connections, because what they do is if you look at all of the numbers in a scatter plot, let's just look at my fingers as the lines where you've got let's see, A, B, C, D, right? So then they fill the full number space going all the way up to the top for each of the ID numbers for each of the letters, right? So they go from 0 to the top. And in that way, they're able to interlace all the numbers. So then they have like the A1, and then it's B something else, and then C something else, etc. And they set them up so they're all 23 apart. So they've got this even spacing. Now, the spacing in New Jersey isn't a rep unit, it's the number 23, which all by itself is interesting because that distinguishes those numbers. It's not like all of the numbers, all of the partitions use that. It's only one of the partitions do that. And that's one of the other interesting things, is that each partition is distinguishable. That's why I say they're different partitions. They've got different behavior in every one of them. And it looks like all of this stuff was produced at about the same time, 2019. Just as in New York, it looks like all of the algorithms were introduced in the same year, 2007. So
2007.
I don't see a good reason. And okay, look, maybe I'm just not very clever when it comes to this kind of thing, or I don't have a very creative imagination. But or maybe in this particular industry, I lack that background. But the thing is, I don't understand how you add an algorithm because you're improving things without applying it to everything when you're just changing everything anyway at the same time. I don't see why you're going to introduce 6 different ones simultaneously. I can picture building on top of each other, but that doesn't seem to be what's happened. It looks like they've all been added simultaneously. That I find problematic. Is that good?
So if Connecticut is the first at 2006, and New York is in 2007, and New Jersey's much later, 2019.
Good enough for you?
That is extremely good. We have real problems. We have real problems with transparency that cuts across all of the election issues that we have. This is a huge one. You've done I can't believe
now listen to this.
One of the things that amazes me most is that I don't think that if you had not approached this with your graphical background, I don't think you would have caught this either. You caught some of the patterns by just seeing the patterns, and that's just amazing. You came at this not from many of us who are looking at this data. We come from math backgrounds, computer science backgrounds. We do this kind of stuff all the time. You came completely from a left field, in this, and you saw things that somebody like me.
Discovery from left field. And the DA in Bridgeport is saying, I'm a conspiracy theorist. I won't be able to prove election fraud. And now we find out they're attacking, conservatives, calling them crazy, making them get mentally evaluated, and then committing them.
Wouldn't have seen because we've been looking at the numbers, and we would have missed the forest for the or the trees, or trees for the forest, whichever is the better metaphor there. But it's tremendous. So I think work you've done. Where do you think you're going? Just in real quick, where do you think your research is heading?
Well, it's heading towards more research papers. In fact, actually, one thing I forgot to give you earlier was a link to my my journal article on the algorithm in New York State, and I'd like to give that to you. But
if you want to send that to me, I'll get that up on the screen for you.
Okay, I'll do that, and I'm going to do the same thing, or hopefully, because I'm writing it right now for New Jersey. Although I hate to say this, but quite frankly, eventually I have to go back to earning a living, and so I don't know. I don't anticipate this being a career, because it's just this oddball thing that I found that I could do. And for all I know, it's the only thing I can do in this space that is meaningful to anybody. And I don't know how many people need algorithms discovered after this is all over with. I have to get back to doing something. I am writing a book about this. We'll see how well that does. I've noticed that it's kind of hard to find agents these days, thanks to the connection to conservatism and the fact that they're worried that their publishers don't want to work with conservatives these days. It's really fascinating. When I grew up, I was always told about the horrors of being blacklisted in the 1950s, or the horrors of being a woman who can't vote in the 1910s, or whatever. All these people who are disenfranchised one way or another. So to finally be one of those people, it's like this spectacular opportunity to experience that firsthand.
Welcome to the club. Well, welcome to the club. Well, this has been great. I'm going to give you an opportunity here at the end of the show to ask me a question.
Well,
we'll answer it if I can.
Just for the sake of your viewers, okay? I'm going to ask a question I have asked you before, but I want them to hear me ask it, okay? Because when I started this, I had no way of knowing if I was heading in the right direction or not with this research, okay? I've worked with enough people outside of my own field to know that I don't know anything about other fields until I start looking into it. And when I do, I don't really learn very much until I start talking to people who understand those fields and have experience with them, so that they can put what I find into context, and I can start verifying the work I've done. Now, I normally find that I am on the right track, because apparently I'm not too bad at figuring things out. But when I started finding these things related to the algorithm, I wanted to talk to people with experience as programmers, as mathematicians, with databases, to see how they felt about what I was finding, okay? So, Jeff, when I brought this stuff to you, or if you want to talk about this in the context of what you know now, what were you thinking? I mean, how legitimate did these findings look to you, or these observations?
I wasn't initially, I have to admit, I see probably 20, or at least back then, 20 new theories a week that somebody will come to me and say, look at this. This is really important. This is going to bring everything down. So I kind of approached it with skepticism, because first of all, it was so complex that it took me a while to figure out, to kind of go down the road that you had gone down. But it wasn't probably until our second or third call when we were going through this that I realized that not only were you onto something, not only was it real, not only could I understand it, it was heading into territory that would be extremely useful in our fight. And so it didn't take long to verify that. The fact that you came at it visually was a real kind of smack in the head for me. It's like, yeah, you got to back up a minute. It's like one of those pictures you see that don't, you have to stare at them a while until you actually see what they are, whether magic art or whatever they're called. That's what you presented me. It's like this magic art picture. Art, it was one of those things. Once I saw it and once it clicked, I couldn't unsee it like many other things could do. So you did a tremendous job getting me the information that I needed to verify that it was going on and validate it. And I can say everything that I have seen, everything that you published in that, goes right along with what I've seen looking at the data.
So mathematicians all over the place are looking at the data, and it's a graphics guy that figures out how they're all related. But nobody here is figured out that Connecticut was the first and New York a year later. And as they add these things, it was Denise Merrill who started it all. And she was lieutenant governor who ordered the thing. Larson signed the contract. And Mark Kohler, Attorney General under Blumenthal. Mark Kohler became Secretary of State when Denise Merrill and Susan Bicewicz started it all. So they got New York involved. Then they got, it took 10 years to get New Jersey involved. But the other states and their involvement, there are layers and layers of algorithms thrown on top of the other ones, which determine the outcome, coming from Scytl in Germany, whose servers have been stolen by the U.S. military. I don't know if that means they're the good guys or the bad guys, but that information is supposed to be coming out on July 23rd, which is 7 days from now. We'll see. Will it be just another deadline that passes? Not if every state senator I connect to this case causes... I'm going to give them all interrogatories, and all of them will have what's called an admission to sign. And if they fail to sign it, it is an admission, because they don't know what they've done, except that Denise Merrill and Susan Bicewicz surely know, because of the contracts they signed and the statements made by those two ladies that they're going to take precautions with the vulnerabilities that they know about, when in fact they didn't stop any of the vulnerabilities. They used those vulnerabilities to take over the elections, force 5G upon you, which has this radiation component, which is horrific. In other words, they put every child in Connecticut at risk with autism to gain control of the election so they could gain more power. More and more power. Look at all the connections to Connecticut. Fauci worked for Yale, folks. Comey, FBI Director of Connecticut. Manafort, Leiter, Leiter. He's the key. He made Murphy worth $480 million in 12 short years. Murphy doubled the GEC budget. You better look into this. Have a great day.